Okay, students, this is the second part of the screencast that I'm hoping to complete for today's readings, and I couldn't quite fit it all into 15 minutes, which is the time limit for a single screencast. I apologize for that. But chapter number 9 is extremely important. I hope you, if you were able to make it through the first screencast, that you've got that message very clearly, that a lot of those strategies and elements are the sort of things you're going to need to have as a resource, because I can't tell what issues or concerns you're going to confront, and you won't know until you get out in the field what's going to happen. And a lot of the times, having a toolbox of strategies and approaches at your ready can help you overcome those issues, and also make sure that you are able to think about and reflect and capture those moments fully, so that when you complete your report for the final part of the class, I hope you're getting this message that I'm trying to send, that failure is an option here in a good way, and that we learn from mistakes, and inquiry guided learning is focused on how well we respond to those issues and overcome them. And so in your final report, even if your project didn't fully land everywhere where you hoped it would, and if you encountered some problems, you've got a backup plan in place, you landed on your feet, you were able to be adaptable, and that's the key. You have to be very adaptable, and that's one of the in order to make sure that you don't miss the opportunities to complete your service hours, and to also have something to write about in your final report so that you can get a good grade. In the previous screencast, I gave the example of the students who set out the boxes to collect the food at the middle school, and they never followed through with their principal. And so how did that affect their grade? Well, when they gave their report to the class, at that part of their project, a main point was that they were going to give away these Pizza Hut gift certificates, and there was going to be this great contest, and it didn't pan out. And if they had followed through with the principal, and the principal had said, no go, we can't do that, then they could have gone to a different sort of plan B. They could have had a contest to distribute flyers or something like that. But as it was, the team didn't really keep track of that. They didn't follow through with that. And so their grade did take a hit, because their final report just wasn't very full. They didn't have a major component of what they had hoped to do in their project that they could write about or report back to the class. So that's the way that it affects their grade. Not that they couldn't do it because there were roadblocks put in the way, but because they simply didn't have enough of that communication, a follow through, in order to make sure that it would be something that would be viable, so that even if they couldn't do the boxes, they could do something else that would sort of provide the spirit of the service that they had originally said in their proposal they would do. And the same way with the nursing home students who were doing the planning on doing the oral histories, they recovered a little bit by turning to other skills that they could offer these residents. But at the same time, in their final report, I did say to them, those oral histories really were the area that it was a major part of your inquiry. Not being able to follow through on that was kind of a problem. And I said, one conversation with a person at the nursing home was enough to dissuade you to do that project. You should have asked her, well, let's see the privacy guidelines, or how about if we come back with another proposal where we can ensure the privacy of the residents, or we've talked to Dr. Evertson, and he said he's helped to supervise many of these oral history projects. They're quite common. There were a lot of things those students could have done, but because they're college students, they were kind of like, well, person in authority, the person that they're working with, they have the final say, and so they just didn't push on it. And that's kind of what the Chapter 9 takes you through. I mean, it's a nuanced thing, because you're dealing with folks who, it's their organization, they're in charge, but you're there to serve, and sometimes you have to have that uncomfortable conversation and push a little bit, but you also have to be respectful. So at the end of the day, no oral histories, no oral histories. And then you can write in your report how we really wanted to do this, but we were stymied by the folks in charge, and so we did this other thing. So I have a perfect example of that to sort of finish up here with. A couple of them. One was a group of students who were volunteering for the food bank down here, the soup kitchen, and they were doing the serving the meals and all that sort of stuff, and that was great. But I was pressing them, as I've pressed all of you, do something that's inquiry oriented, that does something with your skill set. And so they thought, in addition to serving meals, they could help with an effort to get more volunteers, because they had talked to the organization closer to home, and that's what they found out, that they had an issue with volunteers, and it was a very specific issue. The issue was that they had lots of volunteers at certain times in the month and not enough at other times in the month. And their thought was that they could help college students on campus in their organizations and clubs be more organized and participate and help volunteer. But what they needed to facilitate that was a better system of signing up. They had kind of a system where they were sort of months at a time, and it was very clunky. And so my students had in their proposal that they would help work on a website to send this information out to college students so that they could sign up more easily. And they didn't know if they could put the website together or not, but they wanted to try. And what they confronted was there's a board that oversees Closer to Home and its volunteers. And many of the people on the board, as is a very worthy element of their process, they're folks that actually attend the meals and eat the meals there. So some of these are from people who are from sort of maybe more downtrodden walks of life, and they didn't like this idea of having this be in a public forum, that people would have access through the website to this information. There were just roadblocks, and they weren't sold on it. And plus, there were other people, they were working on their own website, and they had their own way of doing things. And what the students found out was that they had some great ideas, but this group was not really that open to hearing their ideas, because they were doing things a certain way. And to them, here you have a couple of college students who are coming in, and with the best of intentions, they are kind of saying, well, here's some things you could do, and it just didn't fly. And that's fine. You know, in another group, maybe that would have worked. This group, it didn't. The dynamics weren't there. And so maybe the due process element there could have been helpful to these students, because they describe the situation as it is. There's an external constituency. They've been doing things a certain way for a long time. They are resistant to change. Those are the facts. Facts versus feelings. Do they understand where they're coming from? Sort of. We're only going to be doing this for a couple of weeks. These people are doing this, every year. We're going to come in and put together a website. They're probably pretty sure we're just going to wind up leaving at the end of our course and not come back, and then they won't have any control over it. And then what could we do to communicate more fully what our expectations were? And so the students weren't able to put the website together, but they were able to write about it in their report and say, we really thought this would be a useful thing. And they reported to the class what was very valuable about their service, but also, quite frankly, what was frustrating about their service. And that was actually perfect, because too oftentimes in a service learning course, we have this sort of attitude where, oh, it's all wonderful and everybody's helping each other out and it's a lot of fun. And no, it is actually, people's opinions get hurt. There's conflict. You're dealing with lots of people who have a lot at stake in these circumstances, and sometimes in very difficult circumstances. And so it inevitably leads to some of these problems. And that is part of the discomfort that we want to have in an FYI class, and see how you respond to that, how resilient you are, and then how you can write about that and report back to the class on what you learned in your reflection. And the final thing I would say on this is that, also dealing with Closer to Home, the first year we did this, we had a group of students. They happened to be 3 students that were on the track team at Chadron State College, 3 young women, and they were serving meals. And this is kind of a serious issue that I'm sharing with you. They were serving meals, and they were having, for the most part, a fun time, and it was fine. But there was one patron at the place at the time who was giving them some hard stuff and was being inappropriate, calling them darling, and really hitting on them, and it made the students uncomfortable. And in their reporting to the class, they kind of laughed this off a little bit. And I realized, as an instructor, I hadn't done a very good job of reiterating what we all went through in the very first chapter in the book, which is this students' sort of Bill of Rights or students' rights in service learning. And I want to stress this, that in all this talk about overcoming problems and issues in Chapter 9, which is an important component of this course, you have every right as a student involved in service to be respected, to be treated with dignity, and to be safe. So make sure in these circumstances that you are not allowing people who are in charge or in positions of authority to take advantage of you. Okay? You're there to do service, you're doing a favor, you're doing work, you're getting credit, but you're also a human being. So in this checklist, it says, I have received a description of the work I am expected to do, right? I have received and am currently receiving the proper training. So if you're in an environment where there's a patron who is maybe says inappropriate things, have you been trained to deal with that? And if you confront this and you talk to the people, the community partners who are involved, your supervisors, do they have some strategies to help you through this? I understand the channels of communication through which I should express my concerns. So you have to have somebody that you can talk to in case there are issues that occur. I understand that I may expect to work in an environment that is reasonably safe and free from sexual and other forms of harassment. And these students should have had the opportunity and should have said to me, we're encountering this, and then I could have talked to the community partner, or I could have encouraged them to try and talk to the community partner. Problem solving is fine, it's great, but we don't want to have a circumstance that is so uncomfortable that the students feel like they can't talk to others about it and resolve the issues because they might lose points or something like that. Your safety, and both emotional and physical safety, is paramount in these circumstances. So please keep on top of that. Communication is the key. I had a group last semester that had some very ambitious ideas for a program they wanted to do on the reservation, and the whole semester they just struggled, exactly like as in Chapter 9 in your book. There were people that had sporting events that were in conflict with their meeting. They had a student who kind of dropped out for a while and then came back. They had personality conflicts, and it was really challenging to try and bring that project to the forefront. And at a certain point, I, the instructor, just had to intervene and become much more involved in their process. So it's important that if you're encountering issues as you do your service next week, there'll be more information about this in the lesson that I post on Thursday. There'll be a sheet that you'll have to fill out for your hours. There'll be a waiver sheet that you have to fill out for doing your field experience. All these sort of things will be covered, but it's important that you keep up the lines of communication. Don't just assume that people understand what's going on. You have to talk to me and let me know what's going on if there are issues so that we can work them through together. I think that's the key elements in Chapter 9. Again, parts that probably are useful to keep in mind as you're finalizing your proposal, and then most of this will be most important when you're doing your actual service and when you're doing your reporting and reflecting at the end. So please review the chapter carefully and keep those concepts in mind and take them seriously. Thank you for your time on this.